Thank you very much for the invitation and for the opportunity. I think the title of my speech is very general because I think economic bridges and economic development for peace and stability is happening on very different places. Even on the contrary, I think if you're looking to the energy question, oil and gas in the Middle East, I think it's not leading to peace and stability. It's leading even to wars and to other involvements which are giving not the impression that it is peace and stability. So far, I beg your pardon if I'm limiting myself not only concerning the time, but also on the subject, on the development in Europe in the last 20 years. Because I think it is a tremendous change of paradigmas which has happened in Europe, may I say, and I don't want to blame everybody, but sometimes I have the impression it's not yet totally understood in Europe. The other conditions under which we are living. I think Berlin is the right place to to speak about, because the Iron Curtain and the Berlin Wall in 1989 brought up this tremendous change. We had a kind of peace and stability by this division between East and West. I think it was peace and stability by the way of coexistence. It was not friendly, but I think everybody was following the rules, which had some bad impacts. I think the Hungarians tried in 1956 to get rid of communism. I think the West was keeping the lines and was not intervening. The same happened in Prague, 1968, and also concerning the Polish difficulties which they did to the communists by Solidarność. I think everybody was keeping these division lines. I have even to do with an institute which is dealing with EU-Russia relations, and from the Russian side we are always getting now a proposal to discuss Yalta. You know, Yalta 1942. This was the division of Europe and parts of the world, and I think there is a strong view within the Russian political elite still follow this line. But this is another subject, and I think my time is too limited to be devoted to this. Let's first look to the positive side. I think for sure for the newly formed democracy from the Iron Curtain on eastwards, I think the economic view had a great importance. Because by the media they were aware on the other side of the Iron Curtain they are living better, they have TV sets, they have cars, other living conditions. I think they can travel far more by tourism. They are richer than we are, and so on and so on. And so you may understand that the European community, as it was named in this time, was the direction in which everybody tried to go. I think this had a special impact on peace and stability. Because if you are looking to the history books, the downfall of big empires, and for sure the Soviet Empire, not only Soviet Union, but all the Warsaw Pact countries and the Comecon countries, I think this was a big empire. And I think the economic relations between the two parts here in Europe or even the world were not too big developed. I'm coming from Austria. We were situated at the Iron Curtain. I think we have been a neutral country. We're still a neutral country, so it was easier for the Soviets to do trade with us. But I think the largest part of trade out of the Austrian capacity with the Soviet bloc was 8%. That's really nothing. So far, because the different systems, I think, had an impact. But also, I think, by the way that the European community, afterwards the European Union was existing, I think the describing it as a project for peace and stability was really realized around 1989. You know, the describing of the European integration is, it is a peace project. It's coming out of the difficulties between the French and Germans for 3 centuries, quite a long time, and I think it's one of the great success stories. But the second success story is for sure the existence of the European Union as a factor of stabilization in Europe. Because the intention of all those building up now new democracy, for sure we want to be a part of the European Union. It is also to be mentioned of NATO. which has also an impact on the situation concerning peace and stability. If you are looking at all the programs proposed by the Americans for protection for Iran or whatever they are meaning by rockets and so on and so on. But for sure, it plays a very important role in this context. And the real success story is that the changes of the political system, which were done on the other side of the Iron Curtain, were connected for sure with peace. And the efforts were to gain stability. Here I may say, first of all, and this is my general thesis, the economy is always moving quicker than politics. I think businessmen are eager to make business. They are looking for new markets. So far, they are trying to use every opportunity possible, and that's for sure going quite well. Politics, and I am a former politician, as you have heard, is always slower. And I think it's always sometimes creating difficulties where they should not be, but it is sometimes a question, and I will focus a little bit also on the role of the nation state, I think to create a lot of difficulties in this context. Here I may say it was a tremendous job which the now new member states of the European Union did. What had they to do? First of all, to overcome the communist system and to build up a democracy. Second, they had to build up a market economy step by step, which is not possible from one day to the other. You have to learn the rules. You have to be able to do it. And the third thing which you had to do, to follow the rules of the European Union. That's quite a great job. I was in the Austrian government as we entered the European Union. I know that even the changes for a democracy, which were since 1945, and to develop more sense for the market, was a difficult job, but we did it. I think by overcoming all the historical background and the communism and so on, was for sure very difficult. And I may say in favor of all these countries, they did a very good job. And it is a contribution not only on the West. The West is always very proud about the changes which has happened. If you were listening last year to the 20 years Jubilee, I think everybody of the West was convinced we did it, that Eastern Europe or Central and Eastern Europe has changed. I may say quite bluntly, they did it for themselves and by themselves. I think the western part of the world was more keeping out and being anxious not to offend Moscow or whatever. I think it is a certain behavior, and I have a deep respect for those dissidents who did it. I think they received not too much thanks because they were quickly out of politics. There was only one survivor. It was Václav Havel for a longer time. For the rest, they were quickly out, and the new branded former communists are still partly in power in this country, which I think is understandable because they know how to do the political machine. I think you have to learn politics. I think you can do a change quite quickly, but then you have to do the day-by-day job, which is also not so easy. I think I can make longer remarks on this, but I think that makes really no sense. I think the economic development was also very much done by privatization. The state-owned companies following the communist system, I think, were brought and were sold. And here the economic bridges were existing because Western companies bought a lot, but it has to be set quite straight also with some difficulties and so on and so on. You won't believe it. Maybe it's a difficult place to speak about. The greatest problems were created in the former GDR, the new states of Germany, because the Western companies came and bought everything and closed it, which brought in a result a high rate of unemployment, and step by step I think it is going down with all the difficulties existing. If you're looking to the political map of Germany, you can see what partly consequences are. It's not an easy job. And it is coming out that the Germans did a very much understandable decision to reunite as quick as possible, but under a very different situation between the western part and the eastern part. You cannot overcome these years since 1948 quite quickly. I think it lasts a longer time. But that's not my subject. I'm only asking for understanding. What importance of bridges and development had neighborhood, a great one. Because if you are looking, the neighborhood countries of the Western market system were the key players. I think Estonia is, may I say, quite bluntly, a branch of Nokia, coming from Finland. I think with a deeper influence in this context, good for Estonia, without any doubt. I think you need some neighbors with some difficulties because sometimes the acceptance is not so much existing. As I grew up in the time after the Second World War, looking to Austrian companies, I was always convinced we are a small country and we have some small enterprises having some importance in Austria. But I never was considering that they might have a chance to become regional players. It happened after 1989. I'm always wondering if you are going through Southeast Europe and partly also through Central and Eastern Europe, you can find Austrian banks everywhere in a huge number. You can find Austrian enterprises. You can find OMV, our oil and gas company, spread over. I think as I grew up, I think this was a small company and yes, what about Shell and BP and so on and so on. But now if you are looking to Nabucco, for example, they are one of the players. I think they are bigger players than the Austrians can ever be. This is a result not only of Europeanization, but of globalization. And I think we have to very much foster on this, that the economic development and the economic bridges are done for sure also by globalization. And I think the connections have a great importance in this context. I think so far the development in Czech Republic, Slovakia, Poland, the Baltic states, now they have some difficulties, Hungary and so on, were a quite stable one, also Slovenia. I may congratulate my Slovenian friends, there are some here. They managed it after the downfall of Yugoslavia to give always the impression that they have never been a part of Yugoslavia, really a partly Western country, and this is a real success story because now they are members of the European Union, not anymore involved in the Balkan difficulties and so on, which I think is quite an impressive story. It was cleverly done here by our Slovenian friends, and they were using every neighborhood possible also to come closer to this situation. Where you can see difficulties are those countries having no neighborhood. That's a problem of Belarus, of Ukraine, of Moldova, and for sure of Russia itself. The Russians have been in this context I think a big problem because the Harvard boys under Yeltsin went all to Russia and said, do market economy as quick as possible. And the consequence was the big economic crisis there, where Yeltsin suffered a lot politically, and a kind of returning of a centralized government under Putin was for sure happening out of this to stabilize the country. I think we have also to learn out of this story, to jump from a centralized planning system to free market economy immediately. It's really impossible. There's always a very nice phrase used in this context. I think it is quite easy to make out of eggs scrambled eggs. You can do it immediately. But to make out of scrambled eggs is extremely difficult. It does not work. And so far, I think all these developments in these countries need some time. So far, I may say, and I will focus on the financial crisis in my last part also, I think the new member states, Bulgaria and Romania, are a little bit different, and I think it may be they entered the European Union in 2007. It was even a little bit too early, not to blame them, but for sure I think it needs some time to improve here. But it's comparatively stable, by all the difficulties the governments have. But I don't want to blame these countries. We are always doing it by media as horrible. What about the Romanian government and what is really happening in Slovakia and so on and so on. And in Czech Republic, I think it's a total nonsense. If you're looking to Belgium, it's not very stable. If you are looking to Italy, it is very special. And so on and so on. I think I really criticize this arrogant behavior of the Western side. I think our political systems are all under development. I can say it for Austria also. We are very convinced, stable democracy, but in reality there are also some questions existing. And so far I think we are a European community in every context. And so far, arrogance is not allowed. We have to contribute that it is stable. My special case, and I had a longer responsibility on this, was Southeast Europe. What is the difference between Central and Eastern and Southeastern Europe? I think the downfall of communism was under different conditions. First and all, the downfall of Yugoslavia, which was a communist country but not connected with the Warsaw Pact system and with the Comecon, I think was followed by 4 wars. I think this is one of the sad stories happening. Yugoslavia finished itself after Tito. I think he was really a genius to establish a comparatively stable system by this rotation system. I think we are by majorities youngsters in Yugoslavia. It was usual that the responsibility is changing every year. I think Prime Minister Slovene, afterwards another one, head of the army a Croat, head of the parliament a Serb, and so on and so on. A rotation system. And I think this rotation system had one problem. I think for a rotation system you need to have one fixed point. That was Marshal Josip Broz Tito. And as he died, I think the fixed point was off. And that's the real reason that there was only rotation without any fixed point. And that had to result 4 wars, and which was even more impressive, and is still a problem. We get a lot of new old countries. I think for sure the different nations were existing, but it is a totally new map. Here I was involved by the Southeast European Cooperative Initiative. It was an American invention. They got it earlier that something has to be done on cross-border cooperation here in Southeast Europe. What had we to do? You might laugh. They built up border stations where never borders have been. In Yugoslavia, there have been no borders, and before, in the Habsburg monarchy, there have been no borders. In the Ottoman Empire, there have been no borders. I think they were learning what borders mean, and I think if something is new, everybody is doing it quite in a straight way. They built huge border stations, and I think developing difficulties between themselves. But economically, I think they have to be together because I think small countries for a very long time a common market and so on and so on. There is one country which has not been part of Yugoslavia, that's Albania, but by the famous Central Secretary of the Communist Party of Albania, Enver Hoxha, I think he excluded Albania from everything in Europe because he was leaving the Soviet system. Then he got a partnership with People's Republic of China, and then even on the end of the development he said Albania must be alone because we are the richest country of the world and everybody wants to conquer us. So far he built up a bunker system every 600 meters. It's now off, but it was really crazy. One-man bunkers spread over the whole country, defending themselves. It had a horrible cultural consequence because the Albanians were excluded from everything, and it's one of the tough developments which for sure they had to do. I think here this Southeast European Cooperative Initiative started. We did an agreement on transport. You won't believe it. Some basics were needed. And then the European Union wake up under the German presidency of the European Union, and they built in 1999 the Stability Pact for Southeast Europe. It was the first exercise of crisis management done by the European Union, and it is a very important story to learn because you can be sure for the rest of the world, and my Japanese friends were taking part in this exercise in the Balkans, and I was always wondering, going to Tokyo and say, why are you doing so? Where are the Balkans and where are you? Huh? And they said, no, we can learn on this subject because crisis management and afterwards stabilization is a job which has to be learned because we will get by globalization for sure in a tougher way. And this we did. I'm only focusing on what we did on economy. For example, we did the Central European Free Trade Association. Just to give you a short story, our British friends founded EFTA, European Free Trade Association, at the same time as the European Economic Community was founded in 1957. It was a competition to this integration exercise. But our British friends are always very realistic. They got out that the European Economic Community is more successful than EFTA. They left it together with Ireland and Denmark and said, okay, we want to be with the European Community. So far, I think EFTA was left with some members, but they also went to the European Union. EFTA is still existing. It will be a nice riddle. Who is now a member of EFTA? I think a huge economic power. It is Norway, Iceland, Switzerland, and Liechtenstein. I think quite a compact entity. But they have also a division in themselves. There's a European Economic Area. All the three are part of them, Norway, Liechtenstein, and Iceland, not Switzerland. I think the background of the difficulties which are now existing are a little bit connected with this, if you are looking to the newspapers, because the special case Switzerland, which was a success story very long for the Swiss, is not anymore existing. But you have to learn it. If you believe it for a very long time, then it is difficult to move in another direction. I'm saying this in favor of the Swiss, because it's a common understanding of the Swiss population here on Self. And following the example of EFTA, the newly developed democracies developed in preparation CEFTA, Central European Free Trade Association, to prepare themselves for the European Union. And as this CEFTA was coming to an end, because they were all entering the European Union, we used this formula for the Balkans. Because before we had, to foster the economic bridges and development, bilateral free trade agreements. You won't believe it, we had 37 between the countries of the Balkans, which is a spaghetti bowl of treaties, and I think you have to be a very developed expert, I think, to be able to handle it. So far it was possible to convince them, let's do a Central European Free Trade Agreement following this example. It's very much working, it's under implementation, and it is a preparation for the common market. We developed also an energy community for Southeast Europe that's even stronger than what is possible on energy within the European Union. You have to know, and personally I'm convinced this is a total nonsense, the nation state is still responsible for energy providing, not the European Union. I think every nation state is doing its own business in this direction, and that's creating a lot of difficulties. For example, hopefully I'm making not again difficulties, I think what Schröder did together with Putin and this Nord Stream pipeline was such a nation-state exercise between Germany and Russia, not including the Baltic states and Poland. And I think it has also some political impact, because you have to know whenever a German politician is kissing a Russian politician, the Polish are a little bit anxious. Because if you are looking to history, they had always to pay the bill under this. I'm quite sure it will not happen. But I think relation of nations are also psychology with historical experiences. So far, I think it is a difficult question. I think in the background of the energy community, you have this battle on energy. I'm really convinced we have now an energy imperialism happening in the world. I think Nabucco is, I think, to go around Russia here in this context. The Russians have some competitive pipelines, South Stream, Blue Stream, and whatever. I think all nice names, but no one of them is done until now. There are two problems. For Nabucco, it's a problem from where to get the gas. I think, to be quite outspoken, technically and economically, the gas should come from Iran. But you can imagine the US ambassador in Vienna is visiting the CEO of OMV every week to tell him quite clearly, impossible, you can't do so. For sure, they are telling now that by Azerbaijan and Turkmenistan and Bombay it's possible, but this is also the problem of the Russians. They promise too much gas elsewhere, to China, India, to the Europeans, and so on, which is also not available because by exploration it was not done enough. That's a real interesting battle, and here energy is more and more an economic bridge to which we have to look. I think the energy question is one of the most important, which are for sure now existing. I think we did also a lot on transport. We started on Monday and Tuesday an exercise along the River Danube concerning transport, economy, tourism, ecology, and so on, of regional cooperation. So I can do a lot of examples which I won't do, you can imagine. It's better to speak about the difficulties. What are the difficulties in this context? You need a trained administration. You won't believe it, there's enough money available, even in the financial crisis. The real problem is starting with our friends eastwards, Bulgaria, Romania, and also in the Balkans. They are not able to use the available money because they have not a trained administration. That needs some time. It's not coming from one day to the other. I think the projects by European Union, European Investment Bank, EBRD, and so on, are quite complicated. There's a lot of monitoring happening concerning corruption, which is quite okay, but you need a staff who is very much trained and who is able to develop projects. And for sure here the sometimes unstable political systems are making the difficulties. The Balkans is always blamed for corruption. I'm always saying quite bluntly, Siemens is not a Balkan enterprise. Corruption is happening elsewhere also. And for corruption you need always someone who is paying. It's not only the receiving line, it is also the paying line, which for sure has to be blamed. The same is with criminality. Here we're quite straight. For sure there's a kind of criminality, oligarchs and so on. But this is elsewhere. You have connected criminal systems of other parts of the world also in this direction. Trafficking human beings, for example. Now all the girls and boys and even for hearts and livers and so on, which are traded, for sure they are going through the Balkans, but they are coming even from China, India, and so on. It is a global business. But it is going through parts where the administration and the justice system is weak. That's to blame, all these countries where this here for sure really happening. So let's come to the last part I've announced. What does it mean now for the financial crisis? I think there was a certain, it's also a result of a certain arrogance, a writing, it was done by economists in Financial Times. Okay, now we have financial crisis. I think all the economies of Eastern and Southeastern Europe will break down immediately, and also the Austrian banks being here involved and so on. I think not only Greeks are using sometimes wrong figures in statistics. I think it was also done by the IMF. They have also used wrong figures by statistics, and then Monsieur Strauss-Kahn had to come to Vienna and to apologize that happened something wrong here. I have another argument. One finance minister, it was from the Czech Republic, said, okay, we are living in a financial crisis, but what's the difference to your countries in the West? We are living in a crisis since 1945, and we are very well trained to live with this. And you have to relearn it. And even a governor of a national bank was more outspoken, okay, we are all breaking down, but don't forget one thing. We have it closer to the earth than you, because we are not on such a high level. There's something true. So far, I think no one of the companies is going out of Southeast Europe or Eastern Europe because they know they need a lot on infrastructure and development and so on, and for sure it's a big chance. So far the bridges are existing, and they will be for sure being even more important. And here I think we have to know that these parts of the world are also part of a global play. I want to make one remark concerning the European Union. I wrote a small book with the title Too Less and Too Late. I think what I mean with this, not to criticize, that's so easy. I think we have to learn to be more prepared for crisis management and for stabilization, because it's for sure a big job. Don't forget the difference between the regions in which we are living and the regions where they are in Eastern and Southeastern Europe. It's more than 50% per capita income. And that's the real danger for stability. Because either the population is leaving these countries, going to better parts, that's a problem for immigration, or they are not able really to overcome. So far, I'm a fan that there should be a European responsibility on education, which is not existing. It is up to the nation state. It was totally right in 1957 to do it. It's not anymore totally right. For sure, there's a responsibility of the nation state possible, but we need also European responsibility. I'm focusing on a special subject, which is a big problem, the bilateral difficulties. I may remember you, our Slovenian friends blocked the Croatians. They were together for centuries, but obviously difficult. The Greeks are blocking the Macedonians out of the state name. A very young politician with the name Alexander the Great is the argument for, is Alexander the Great a Macedonian, or is he a Greek or whatever? I think here sometimes you are really wondering, have we only these problems or others? I'm quite sure if the Croatians are in, they will block the Serbs, and if the Serbs are in, they block the Montenegrinians, and so on and so on. So far, I think we need education also in history. If you are looking to the history books of the region, maybe we can touch it in the panel discussion afterwards. It's a nightmare. Because here you are confronted with Greater Romania, Greater Serbia, Greater Bulgaria, Greater Greece, Greater whatever. I'm always saying I'm born in Greater Germany and I know the result from my country. So far, I think we have to have a tough look on this. The quicker we are learning on the subject and we are making reality checks is quite necessary. Here I'm critical on us Europeans on the Western side. Reality check about the other parts under development, being under transformation is sometimes not really existing. Because I think history is not moving at the same velocity and on the same level. Don't forget, in 1912, Skopje, with the name Üsküp, has been still a city in the Ottoman Empire. It's less than 100 years and connected for sure with another culture and with other traditions. And that has to be understood. I'm using only this one example, but I think it has a deep impact on the perception of religion and so on and so on. Because for these parts being under development, you have always to know. You need to know something about politics, and it's moving. You have to know something about history, but partly you have to know something also about mythology. I will drop one sentence, which was done by a former foreign minister of Yugoslavia and Serbia and Montenegro, Vuk Drašković. He was speaking under politics, history, and mythology. He started his speech with, Kosovo is the Jerusalem of Serbia. If you are really understanding, it's total mythology. I think, are you understanding Jerusalem in a Jewish way, in a Christian way, in a Muslim way, or whatever? Here you can see what the difficulties are. And you can only overcome this, I think, by education, because education has to be the bridge from one to the other. Maybe it's an introduction for the panel in the evening. Thank you very much.